In three, two.
Hello, everybody. We actually had a little production start there with a 3, 2, 1 countdown. I'm Eric Planey.
I'm Lucas Finko. How are you?
Great. Hope everyone is doing well. And we are, get this ready, we're the Pirates of Clean Tech.
Arg.
I'm not doing the ARG anymore. Where's your patch at?
Oh, it's not ready for prime time yet.
All right. Well, we have patches. We don't want to use them just quite yet, but we have patches. We're here to talk about the events over the last week and headlines in the world of clean tech, clean energy, sustainability, and ESG. The views and opinions expressed by Lucas and myself are our own. Thank you very much. And we just want to inform people about what's going on and have an open dialogue. And we really hope that people continue to follow us to the numbers that they have in our first 2 episodes, and we appreciate that. And Lucas, you want to tell people how they can comment right back, tell us how horrible we are, and go from there?
Yeah, sure. So Eric and I work hard all week reading through clean tech articles and finding the most informative and interesting articles. You don't have to. And so you can always click subscribe, which is right down here, and then you'll get a notification when we post a new video. It doesn't cost you anything. And you can also comment down below and let us know what you think, or if you want to ask any questions or suggest any articles for next week. We're happy to hear from you.
Absolutely. And as always, we have Lucas go first. He's the brains of the operation. I'm the beauty, of course. Lucas, what did you find interesting this week? There was a lot of good stuff. And not so much of a theme like last week, where there was a lot of big picture last week. This week, I thought there was a lot more detailed transactional type stories.
Yeah, so what I found this week was really encouraging and really interesting. So I'm super excited to get into it. So here's our first article from Utility Dive. Some clean energy groups are proposing FERC rules for a national transmission system upgrade that would save about $47 billion a year. So this is one of the things I believe that is important for a renewable energy future, is that we must have more transmission lines to get energy from where it's going to be created, where there's renewable resource, to where it's going to be consumed in big cities. A lot of times those two are separate. So this is great to hear that there's going to be a large initiative that's going to push for more transmission upgrades with FERC. So very excited to see this news.
Fantastic. Do we have any NIMBY issues? Because it seems like transmission and NIMBY always go hand in hand, and that's caused bottlenecks in the past. How has the environment changed at all? Do we know?
Yeah, so that's precisely what this is about. Nobody wants transmission lines in their backyard. They're notoriously hard to permit. They're hard to put through. You basically have to be the government in order to get a transmission line put in. I mean, unless you go way out in the middle of nowhere, maybe like, where there's a lot of farmland, maybe like, more rural states, maybe it's a little easier, but yeah, so hopefully if there's a large, government initiative to get more transmission lines, then we'll be able to see more renewables being put in, and that renewable energy being brought to more people who want it. So this is really good.
That's great. And I thought it was a good story as well. I got very excited about it. We talked offline about how transmission is not the sexiest thing, but it's by far one of the most critical things in order to make renewable energy work. So happy to see that the tide is changing from a consumer standpoint about their wanting to have more renewable energy. So I suspect that they will change their acceptance of different transmission lines going through the country.
Right, and we can see here we're behind China and Europe on transmission. So we need to make this investment.
Sad to say, we're always behind China and Europe, it seems.
Okay, I'm gonna move on. Another great development. West Coast states are teaming up to build an electric highway. So this is mainly for trucks and transportation, which is why you have a picture of trucks here. Hopefully in the future they'll be electric. So what they want to do is they want to go through the highway system out west. They want to make sure there's electric vehicle chargers every 50 miles. This is fantastic. It turns out a large percentage of carbon emissions come from not only vehicles and transportation, but from medium duty and light duty kind of transportation vehicles, trucks and these sorts of things. So upgrading these could make a big impact on our carbon output.
Yeah, that was great. First off, this is this Gizmodo? Is that the publication?
Correct.
Okay. Same thing. Very excited about it. We've talked in the past episodes about how there has not been a national coordinated effort for charging infrastructure, which is ridiculous. We're a very big country, and it is hard to put a national plan in place, but it's essential. So, given the trade and transport of the West Coast, it's great to see them working together, and it's a fantastic start. And I agree. There's a lot of light duty trucks being proposed, electric trucks being proposed by a variety of companies, from your big OEMs to startup companies. So this dovetails very well to that. So I'm happy to see it, and great article.
Yeah. So I actually think this is good. It kind of dovetails with my next article about Lyft. Lyft came out and pledged that they would be 100% electric vehicles by 2030. So this is great to see. I'm very happy to see companies push for this. I do think this isn't the first place I would go, though. These car fleet for Lyft, these drivers, they're very interested in keeping their vehicle moving and making money. And I just can't see them wanting to stop and wait for an hour for the car to charge. So I really wish we had these replaceable batteries, which we talked about. They're interchangeable, where you could take it out, leave it somewhere, they charge it, you grab a fully charged one, plug it in, and you could go. That would make, these Lyft drivers fully competitive with gasoline. So I think I would wait to push for this until we had some kind of a quick charge exchange like that on vehicles.
So my 2 points on this, your point is absolutely valid. I remember being in Manhattan one time talking to a taxi driver, and one of his biggest issues was the real estate market in New York City and Manhattan was booming. So all the gas stations were being torn down for high rises to go up. Hard for them to find gas stations, and it would take an hour to go to Queens, get gas and come back, or it wasn't very logistical. And so your point about Lyft drivers having the same problem is certainly valid. I think my two responses are, by 2030, DC fast charging should be to the point where you can get 100% charge in about 15 minutes, I suspect. And then you have to think by 2030 that, let's say, a Chevy Bolt or equivalent, a Nissan Leaf, should be able to get you at least 400 miles, at least. So then I think you're starting to get comparable to, most cars, gasoline engine cars in city driving, are probably going to be 300 miles to a tank of gas. Probably not 400. That's probably more your highway cruising. So it could be competitive by 2030. What I liked about this article was that Lyft was taking this initiative. What made me sad and angry was the fact that one company is taking this initiative, whereas in countries like South Korea and France, they're talking about zero non-hybrid sales in their countries of all passenger vehicles by 2030. And, we're just not there yet. And I don't think we're going to be completely there. And I understand that. But I'd like to see a little bit more government incentive to push us towards EV and charging infrastructure, for mass adoption by 2030.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, you make a good point. If it takes them an hour anyhow to go get gas, then why not just charge up at the nearest charging station? Yeah.
I think it'll be better. So I do think by 2030, it's going to 15 minutes and you're going to be done at the most.
They also point out that it would be significantly cheaper for fuel costs, which is a big driver for them also. Yeah, financial no-brainer. I couldn't say it better.
Fantastic. Good story.
Okay, one last big article here, which I'm also very excited about. New Jersey has decided they want to lead the nation in offshore wind. So they're building a big turbine port, which is really cool. So companies will be able to assemble their turbines. I didn't know this before. I read this too. They have to assemble it and bring it upright before it even goes out to sea. So they can't have any bridges in the way. Like, there's very few ports where there's no bridge in the way and you can just go out to sea with it. So New Jersey is going to build one of these down in the southern part of New Jersey. They want to be the hub for construction And as we'll see, there's a lot of renewable wind energy uh, resource on the East Coast. There's shallow waters off of the East Coast. There's a lot of opportunity for wind turbines. So there could be thousands of wind turbines being assembled here in New Jersey. So very interesting. Some of them could be 800 feet high. So yeah, there's no way you're getting that past any kind of a bridge. So they could be ready by 2024.
Why do I envision like Caesars sponsoring a wind turbine outside of Atlantic City, so 800 feet tall? This is fantastic. We've talked in the past about how some people don't consider wind turbines beautiful. I see them offshore in Europe, everywhere. I've seen them offshore in Asia. I think they're fantastic to look at, to observe. And I applaud Murphy for being the one that's going to take this on. Offshore wind is only developing now. I'm not sure if the project in Nantucket ever came to fruition. I think it's in development possibly. But there needs to be more offshore wind, and we need to connect it to the grid. And it's a great way. It's a great way to do it.
Yeah, I believe there's only 5 turbines in operation off the East Coast right now, which is just crazy.
Horrible.
Yeah. Oh, and so to dovetail with that, Vestas got a huge order for 1,100 megawatts of offshore wind. This is in Scotland. I just wanted to bring this up real quick. 114 turbines. I mean, this is the kind of development we should be having offshore in the U.S. right now. To put this in scale, that's about one large generator, like a nuclear generator, where Indian Point has 2 of these 1 gigawatt generators. So that's a lot of power here.
That's probably about 5 to 6 coal plants on the average size coal plant, right? Because a coal plant's about 250 megawatt on average.
Yeah, gas plants usually about 200-300 megawatts. Yeah, I think coal plants get a little bigger, so it's like 2 coal plants maybe. Yeah.
Wow. So it's fantastic. Scotland, obviously anyone who talks about that area off Scotland, there's a ton of wind there. So happy to see it. This is a leader, always has been a leader. So it's fantastic. And that's Sour Energy is where you got that publication from.
Yep, great. Okay, Eric, I think you had some wind stories too, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately mine takes a little bit of a negative turn, but also from the Washington Post. So Washington Post obviously doing an expose on offshore wind. This one makes me a little bit sad because I actually know the development team here. Lake Erie and a group in Cleveland, Ohio has been trying for years now to be the first freshwater offshore project in the United States. The project is called Icebreaker, and the team that's developing it is the Lake Erie Economic Development Corporation, and called LEEDCO. And they've had just really a lot of resistance that you wouldn't think they would have. Their pilot project was only going to be roughly 6 turbines, but they thought that this could be the genesis for fantastic offshore wind in all 5 Great Lakes. But unfortunately, they're starting to get regulatory pushback, and of all places, they're getting it from the bird community. And obviously, Lake Erie, if anyone knows the geography, is a big corridor between Canada and Ohio and the US for trade. And there is a big bird migration pattern that takes place from north to south during the seasons. And unfortunately, it seems like they're getting so much pushback from Ohio's regulatory agencies that come from people who are really, protective of bird migration patterns, that this may jeopardize the whole entire project. And I know the team there. The team there has been working on this for years. I still think that this will happen. I think early on, back when nobody in offshore East Coast wanted turbines because of NIMBY, they didn't want to see them. Ohio was always different. They embraced it. They embraced the new technology. And this is quite upsetting. And the one thing that came to mind when I was reading the story is, obviously they do have to be careful and they want to be respectful of bird migration, and they worry about the livelihoods of these populations of certain species. But my question is, air pollution itself has had damaging effects on bird populations. And so when you're trying to replace a state like Ohio and Pennsylvania and the rest of the Great Lake Corridor, which is heavy coal producing states, for electricity, coal producing, then you would think that they'd want to find a solution in order to bring offshore wind, and that teams will work together. And here's another circumstance where politics seem to get in the way, and you have 2 groups that are not talking to each other, and as a result of that, something as strong as offshore wind development may be in jeopardy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think New York City had a challenge like this. There was a large wind project proposed off of Long Island. It was killed for similar reasons because of the environmental impact statement said it would have a negative impact on birds and nesting. And it's just really sad to see environmentalists kind of holding up an environmentally clean energy project. And you're right. It's also kind of balancing and prioritizing what's important here. Even the study about the birds said it would have a minor impact on the birds, like 10% of the birds would be impacted. I think our issues with climate and with carbon are much bigger and much more important. And, we just have to prioritize here what's really important to us.
Right. So I hope that LEEDCO keeps going. I hope that the state of Ohio and its regulatory bodies come together, and then we start having a groundbreaking or a water breaking ceremony in the very near future for this project. It's too important.
Yeah, there's a visual simulation. There they are. Look at that. Interesting.
There you go.
Yeah. I also think they can come up with some relatively easy engineering solutions for these things too. So I encourage them to keep going also. Some solution will be found.
I do. And, birds are smart. I mean, if you give them certain corridors to go through, maybe that's a solution. So
Yeah.
if anyone has any comments or expertise in this area, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Cool. Now, this one is just, as we talked about early on, Europeans and the Chinese always seem to be ahead of us. And they certainly, the EU and their mandates to bring renewable power by 2030, I think 80% generation by 2030, they find innovative ways to get it done. I've always been a big fan of the Dutch government and Denmark's government. They've always been progressive in so many different ways. I've had great conversations and working relationships with both governments in my past job doing economic development. And so out of Recharge News, the Dutch to finance huge Danish green hydrogen plan via EU renewable power swap deal. And right off the headline, Netherlands will pay at least 100 million euro to finance a tender for 100 megawatts in green hydrogen output capacity as Denmark's power makes up for Dutch renewable target shortfall. So a couple things here I liked about this story. One is, of course, the cooperation between Denmark and the Netherlands. The Netherlands are being realistic in the fact that they're going to have a target shortfall. And so instead of spending maybe a lot of money or too much money kind of on a resource development standpoint, they're going to the Danish who are ahead of the game, ahead of the curve, and they're coming up with a power swap deal. The second thing I liked about this story is we haven't talked a lot about hydrogen, and the fact that there is a green hydrogen capacity from the technology is something very fascinating to me. I think we talk a little bit about hydrogen from power generation standpoint. We also talk about hydrogen on hydrogen fueled cars. That's not a big conversation in America, but in a lot of countries in Asia, hydrogen fuel for automobiles is still being talked about very sincerely. So I don't know if you want to scroll down a little bit. The Netherlands still needs to achieve 14% renewable energy target for this year. And so they're just not getting there quite yet. So again, this is fascinating to me. I don't know if you ever come across a lot of hydrogen technology articles, but this was a good one, I thought.
Yeah, I've always wondered why there isn't more of this. Why we're not using renewable energy for electrolysis to create hydrogen. Its energy density is really good. It can compete with gasoline as long as you produce it in a renewable fashion. I'm all for it. They call it green hydrogen here. I've often warned people to be careful. You can produce hydrogen from natural gas, and so you'll see some kind of non-clean, non-renewable hydrogen out in the world too. So
yeah, but I think the EU does a better job of policing that activity. So if they're going to say green hydrogen, like you said, from electrolysis in this standpoint, then they're going to watch it, and I think it won't be intermixed with anything that's non-green.
Yeah, and this is parallel to what we're seeing in the US too, that some places have great renewable resource, and we need to be able to transmit that to places that need renewable energy. So
California was a leader in the last decade on hydrogen and putting a hydrogen infrastructure for automobiles in. It's some of the infrastructure is still in existence. I don't see the U.S. replicating it on nationwide. So, hydrogen technology is not something we talked about in mass in the United States for now, but happy to see it go in this direction for at least for Europe.
Yeah, thanks Recharge for that article. That was good. You want to move on?
Let's move on. This one is Business Insider. Always like Business Insider. I always find that they come up with some innovative stuff, not just in the field of energy, but in politics and societal issues as well. This was just a story that broke in a couple of media sources last week. Goldman Sachs says renewable energy spending will surpass oil and gas for the first time ever in 2021 and sees total investment spiking to 16 trillion over the next decade. What I like about this article, a couple things, and also I'm just going to extrapolate from some other articles I read over the week. Number one, this is another point of no return that we've been waiting for. We talk about these little anecdotal things about Germany having one day with all renewable energy generation last year. Now we're going to get to the point where spending is going to be over oil and gas next year, 2021. Now that doesn't mean it's going to happen every year. I think part of this too is we have to look at the oil and gas spending is going to be off right now. There's just not a lot of capex in both the United States and globally. So we have to take that into account. So it may not be that 2022 is going to have, renewables over oil and gas spending as well. But I think the direction we're heading is the right direction. And the fact that we're, going to be at 16 trillion of spending through 2030 is absolutely fantastic. So I'm really excited about this one. I saw a couple other stories that said something very similar. But again, the other thing is because of the coronavirus comeback, we're going to see a lot more spending take place that is stimulus spending that is related to accelerating renewable energy projects. There was a sidebar article in one of the stories that Lucas posts where the utility Excel, I think, is going to accelerate $3 billion in spending in the state of Minnesota for coronavirus-related recovery efforts on green energy. So we're seeing a lot going on. This is the big picture story that we want to be talking about, and I'm very happy about it.
Cool. Agreed. This is great. Up to $16 trillion in investment through 2030 to keep to our 2 degrees Celsius goal. That's a lot of money that needs to get moved into projects and to clean energy technologies. So very happy to see these big numbers coming out of Goldman Sachs, no less.
I do want to see some benchmarks. So, these stories are great, and we read them, and then we kind of forget about them. So, hopefully, as the years go on, we're kind of tracking to see if this comes to fruition or not. So, we'll just have to be cognizant about that.
Yeah, we'll have to revisit that in the future episode.
And I'm in the mood for a beer, so I thought our last story is just the perfect way to end our stories for this week. As you know, I'm the electric vehicle lover. I've also been a lover of the brand called Skoda. Skoda and Tatra were two Czech companies that made automobiles, some of those innovative automobiles. Skoda is still in existence. They're a subsidiary of VW now, and some of their products on a dollar value basis are even better than what you see from coming out of Volkswagen. So I think I just lost the article. Hold on. I just lost the article, so can you read the headline?
Sure. So Skoda's first electric vehicle was a 1939 beer truck, which is actually very interesting.
So one thing that I think is fascinating is that people don't realize in the early 1900s, people were making electric vehicles alongside petroleum-based gasoline vehicles. Last September, I was at an electric vehicle trade show in Detroit, and I saw a Detroit Motor Company vehicle from, I believe, 1918, all electric. And what struck me was that day I was actually at the convention was September 11th of 2019. And I thought to myself, imagine if we went to an all-electric vehicle society back in the early 1900s. Would we have had a 9/11? Would there have been that much geopolitical disparity that led to, say, several crises in the Middle East? We kind of abandoned electric vehicles back in the day because the price of petroleum was so cheap in the United States that it was just way more economical to buy a gasoline-powered vehicle instead of electric. So when I saw this story, it was kind of dovetailed with Skoda's new launching of several electric vehicles. They're talking about making some of their emerging market products, like in the country of India, for example, all electric. So again, these are great innovations coming out of the Volkswagen group of companies, and it goes along with all the other OEMs that are just working very significantly. But I really want to, if I had all the money in the world, I think I would chase down the electric beer truck and try to have one in my garage. So you and I just may have to build a new one.
Think of all the beer brands that could have an EV of their own right now with their brand on the side.
Oh my God, fantastic. So I think we need to come up with an electric beer truck company. Maybe the Pirates of beer delivery.
Oh, they note at the bottom here, they also have a EV SUV coming out, 302 horsepower, all-wheel drive, awesome, 82 kilowatt hour battery pack, 310-mile range. That sounds really cool.
That is fantastic because all-wheel drive has been the Achilles heel for EV. Effectively, the solution is to have two motors, and I think that's what's going to be taking place. So your motor transmission unit is going to be right in between the axle or on the axle, pushed out to the wheel wells, and you're going to have two sets of them. So,
Right.
Great. So we're seeing a lot of good stuff. I liked this week's articles because I felt like there was just a lot of variety. Last week was all kind of macroeconomic and big picture data. This time we found some great technical stories as well. So it was a better blend, I thought, of stories.
Yeah, a lot of good news, a lot of good developments. It's been a good week for clean tech. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
Yep. And I think with that, we're concluding our third episode of Pirates of Clean Tech. Again, we appreciate all the viewing and all the feedback we've gotten. Really some fantastic critiques, some of them positive, some of them not positive, but we respect all of everyone's viewpoints. Please, in the YouTube comment section, please comment below. Please be a subscriber. And don't forget to check our Twitter feed, which is @CleanPirates. And anything else I'm missing?
Yeah, just if you like this video, click the like button below. Thanks for hanging in with us. I hope you enjoyed this week's news, and we look forward to talking next week with you about even more good news.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody.
Adios.
Hard. That's hard.